Hey, welcome to the SPP. I'm getting used to broadcasting on Blab. I do have two things that still bug me a little bit. One is the lack of scrolling on the comments. I know that Dave loves that, and the lack of the inability to have some sort of private off-air time before hopping in.
Yeah, it's the worst. But I do like the occasional. I mean, well, the never-ending comments. But every time I look over there, I usually see something that makes me laugh. Like Rachel Duncan right now. What have I told you about Yepers? Which is exactly where I came from. So awesome. Yeah.
So today we're going to have Maya Goode on to talk about. Maya works with us too, so it's sort of dual. Like we know her several ways, and she's going to talk about intentional reading for authors, which is a big deal. Like it's you want to feed your head basically. You don't, much like on our last show. If we talked to Kevin Tomlinson, and he talked about getting more experience to sort of feed your author brain, and the same thing is true of reading. And I know that Sean has kind of attacked reading anew with zeal, and I have as well. I've been trying to read a lot more. Dave, do you read? You don't read a lot of fiction, right? You read a lot of nonfiction.
Correct. Yes.
But nonfiction.
Right now, I'm reading 11/22/63. Is that the title? Stephen King.
Yeah, that's my something cool. Actually, you guys
are going to reach the annoying part at the same time. It's going to be great.
I just finised actually.
Oh, you weren't annoyed?
I wasn't annoyed. Because and I had two different people tell me. Well, I don't know if we should.
No, we shouldn't spoil it.
Yeah.
I sent out an email last week to our list, Collective Inkwell list, and I was talking about how I didn't like the ending of The Witch, and I forgot what I asked people in the email, something like how they felt about endings that were just like really like dark or whatever. So I got a bunch of email on that, and a lot of people like spoiled endings of other movies, like, oh, I hated the end of this movie when everyone died. I'm like, I didn't see that. Knock it off.
Is there any examples you would like to give?
I don't want to spoil stuff.
Yeah, well, I won't spoil what the ending is, but Amy told me that it sucked, that I would hate it.
The actual ending?
The actual ending.
I don't remember.
Somebody emailed me in response to the email, and they said that they love the ending of 11/22/63, and I was like, oh, please don't spoil the ending in this email. So.
All right, hold on. I want to have a quick guest appearance. Maya is going to call in, set my mic, and then leave until it's time for her to come in again. There's some necessity there. So yeah, go ahead and do that. And we're going to say hi super quick. Yay. How's it going? You going to set your mic and...
Yeah, I'm just setting my mic and then coming back in. Okay.
All right.
Good. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Look at all these high fives she's getting.
Wow, that was awesome.
It's a look for Maya I haven't seen before. We saw her with her hair. It was kind of cool, and I haven't seen it in the thing before, so that's interesting. New looking forward to a new side of Maya Goode. Okay, so go ahead. What were you saying?
Well, so Amy told me that the last 50 pages were suck, which I'm not. That's Stephen King. That's what I expect, to really really enjoy a book and then be totally deflated in the last 50 pages. And then you, Johnny, told me that there was a whole a whole sideways thing.
It's all the relationship stuff with his girlfriend that I was just bored by it.
Yeah, that didn't bother me, because it may have bothered me if like it meandered all the way and then I wasn't satisfied by the ending. But I actually didn't have a problem with the ending. It seemed like okay. Like I don't feel like he knew where he was going ahead of time, which for a time travel book,
careful.
Probably want to. No, I'm not going to ruin anything.
I don't remember the ending. Can you describe it to me in detail? I seriously don't remember it though, so I don't remember. But I don't have the Stephen King writes shitty endings thing that you do. I don't. Yeah,
it's not an amazing ending. It didn't blow my mind or anything, but it was fine. Like it was resolution, which it's not the ending of it. Do you remember the ending of it?
No, I don't remember the ending of it.
Well, it involves a gang rape with some 12-year-old. Like
it involves what?
A gang. I'm not kidding. This sounds like I'm making shit up, but it involves a gang rape with 12-year-olds. All right, like that's the ending of the book, because that's how they have
but to be fair, a lot of books end that way.
Most, right?
Because that's how they have to. Waiting to see the end of that sentence.
That's how they seal their secret together and like unify their power or some shit. I don't know. I was like 13 when I read it.
I feel like I need to go read this again, because it's really hard for me to leap to solidifying your power from. Do you just mean a group sexual experience, or do you mean a gang rape?
It's not a rape.
Is it like if we all rape this person together, we're going to be bonded for life? Is it like that?
No, it wasn't a rape. Bev Marsh was very willing in the gang banginess of getting with all her friends. Like it's just an atrocious ending. And it involves
to look this up just so I can, just out of curiosity,
a turtle and a giant spider. Okay, it's just stupid. And King, it's not like King is incapable of a good ending. Plenty of his books have good endings, but I'm just like, I don't know that it's going to be a good ending, ahead of time. And 11/22/63 didn't have an amazing ending, but it didn't totally shit the bed. I liked it. It's my something cool because I think that guy is such a master storyteller and he's so effortless at it. He makes it look easy. And I just love his dialogue and I love his so I have so much enjoyment of just reading the way he puts stories together that I didn't even mind the meandering girlfriend stuff. Although I understand why that could be annoying.
Just went on for too long. It's not like, oh, there was a love story and that bothered me. It was just, it went on and on and on. Oh my God.
It did go on and on, but also King does tend to go on and on. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is true. All right. So did you have anything cool, Dave?
My something cool is two things. There's a show called Shades of Blue that's on NBC, which is pretty damned awesome for a network show. It's a cop show. What's her, Jennifer Lopez? Is that the singer? I forget her damn name. Okay, yeah, she's a star of it, and Ray Liotta is awesome.
Ray Liotta is always awesome. Yeah. Even in bad movies, Ray Liotta is awesome.
It's really good, and she plays in the very beginning. They're all like corrupt cops, and they're sort of in league, and something bad happens. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's really surprisingly good. I'm glad I gave it a shot. So
I don't have anything.
Also, I'll do two. Better Call Saul is just friggin' awesome. Better Call Saul, the second season. What I like about it, and this is why it is my favorite show right now, is it displays a confidence. It displays a confidence in both its storytelling, its actors, its writing, and also in its viewers. It doesn't the fear I had was they'd immediately go into some sort of try to tie in with Breaking Bad in some way just to catch viewers and hey, remember we did Breaking Bad too, and this is why you liked it. No, they don't do that at all. And I thought they might do it in the second season, and they're not doing it. They're very confident, and they're taking the time to tell the story they want to tell. And I love it. It's just, it is a master class in television, acting, and writing, all three in one. If you want to ever write television, I suggest you watch this show.
Yeah, I'll echo everything that Dave just said. And I will also say, I haven't started second season, actually. I want to wait till all the episodes are out there and watch them at once. But I did see the first season not too long ago. And I was actually I love Breaking Bad, but I wasn't really looking forward to Better Call Saul because for some reason I'm with you. That's the reason
that's the reason I never got into it yet. I mean, I will because you guys have said such great things.
No, how much did you love the 5-0 episode?
Which episode?
With Mike, his episode.
Oh, it was so good.
That is the best. If you take all the episodes of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, I would say this is the best of all of those.
I wouldn't agree with that, but it was fantastic. It was really.
I just such a beautifully heartbreaking hour. I just fucking.
I agree, but Breaking Bad had some amazing episodes. But yeah, it's really really good. Have you? I feel like I asked you this, but have you watched Bloodline?
I watched the first episode and I liked it, but I don't know, for some reason I just didn't get around to watching the next one, on to something else. But I'll probably go back at some point.
I'm never going to get to a new series. Never.
You're still watching Battlestar Galactica again.
Because we're watching 3 things and they all have hundreds of episodes.
You don't have to watch TV with your wife. You can just watch whatever you want.
I wouldn't watch more. We're full. We're full. We watch for at least an hour a night, maybe an hour and a half or more. And we're still on these same 3 series that just refuse to end. They're just so long, all of them.
Yeah, Bloodline. Because we just finished Friday Night Lights, which we watched as a family, and I loved Friday Night Lights. I mean, it took me a long time to get there, but I really really liked it. And I was missing Kyle Chandler, who's the main character in Bloodline. So so I started watching that, and the mystery is fantastic. It's a beautifully shot series, and it's just.
Kate Morgan says, I didn't care for Bloodline. It did a lot of things well, but I couldn't connect any of the characters. And that's kind of how I felt in the first step. I didn't connect anybody in the first episode.
I can see that. I'm only on episode 2, so I don't know.
Oh, you're not even into it enough. Oh, your opinion doesn't count.
I'm just saying that the mystery so far is good, and it's enough to keep me going. And I'm curious. I'm ready. So yeah.
How about Full House? The next.
Fuller House.
Oh, actually, I did see Netflix sent me an email lately. Fuller House.
My God, it's gotten the worst reviews. And here's something I went to.
Well, it's getting reviewed because it really is like Full House again. Like there's
I was at dinner with somebody last night that said not only was it the greatest thing ever made, but they watched every episode in a short amount of time, and that I would love it.
Fuller
and
House.
I said, clearly, you do not know me.
Fuller. What?
Yeah. So, yeah, I got to move. That's all there is. I got to move out of Florida.
That's insane.
You should listen to our last episode of Self-Publishing Podcast if you want to do that. One of the things that is probably the reason that you feel so out of sorts in Florida is because you just feel that you can't get a good book cover design, which is a problem that I share.
Yeah, it's in Florida. If you want a good book cover design, you're screwed. Really, you are screwed because there's nobody with any talent in Florida except for a small amount of people. It's mostly backwoods hillbillies and crazy people. But fortunately, you don't have to go to Florida to get your book cover design. You can go to 99designs.com/SPP, and they have zillions of designers even, and some might even live in Florida, but they're among the good people. They're among the creattives that I told you about.
The good ones.
Yeah,
I think that Dave needs to move out of Florida because it's only a matter of time before the state has him assassinated.
No, here's the thing about Florida. People that live in Florida, no, it's a horrible place. So, but you know what? You don't have to resign yourself to horribleness. And that's true with book covers as well, because you can go to 99 Designs and you're going to get a great book cover. We've used them many times. Stuff we couldn't figure out on our own. We went to them and said, hey, make something beautiful, make something that looks like it's going to be a bestseller. And we've never been disappointed. They've always had more options that we could choose. I was looking at a thread the other day on Facebook, and people were talking about 99 Designs that had used them through us. And all of them had the same thing in common, that they all had too many great covers to choose from. And that to me is a quality problem.
That is a quality problem. So start your custom design at 99designs.com/Florida. Wait, no, /SPP. Use that link and you get the free Power Pack upgrade valued at $99. And much like in the previous episode, it would keep you away from having to sleep with models. This will keep you out of Florida, is the promise.
And that is worth the price of admission alone.
Price of admission alone.
Quickly, unlike living in Florida with 99 Designs, you have nothing to lose.
Quickly before I acknowledge our guest, I received an email or a Twitter or something. Somebody was asking if we actually believed in 99 Designs or if we were just stooging it up. And, no, we actually like them and use them. And
we've turned down many people that want to advertise on this show.
Yes. All right. So
including Hitler Youth.
Yeah, well, there it is. Zoom right in there.
20 minutes into the episode.
So
good job.
Welcome to the guest, Maya. Maya Goode is our guest, and she's runs the Literary Roadhouse podcast and is an author and is our I don't know what we would even call you. Like, you handle all our shit, which is great.
Well, that's
you put up with us. No, not shit like
janitor.
Shit like the stuff, like lots of stuff.
She also tolerates us, yes. Which is high maintenance, I'm sure.
My God,
well, it helps that I like you guys.
Why, I don't know.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's your grandma muff, Dave. Actually, she liked us before the Grandma muff, so I don't know what it is.
Yes. So anyway, so we're going to talk today about intentional reading, and you pitched this idea, right? Like this was, or did Amy pitch it? I don't even remember how it came about.
Amy mentioned it, and I thought it was a great idea for a podcast. It's something that I really believe in, and it's something I've been working on for over the past year, and I've seen it really help my writing.
So what does it mean?
Describe what it is for people such as myself that are very unintentional in their reading.
Well, let me just start with how I came to it. Last year, I was revising one of my novels, and I realized that I had some really blank spots in my knowledge base. And part of it needed to be that I just needed to read more. But when you see that as advice for new writers, you see you need to read a lot. No one ever tells you how to read in a way that will help you with your writing. And so a lot of writers just start reading a bunch of whatever's in their genre, and they go through it quickly. And it doesn't have as much of an effect as it would if you're more intentional about it. And that's actually how the podcast came to be. I started Literary Roadhouse because I needed to read more, and I needed to do it in a way that I was going to learn a lot from what I was reading.
So reading a bunch of John Grisham novels isn't necessarily going to help me if I'm trying to write like a romance or something, probably.
Reading some might actually, but if that's all you're reading, you're going to have gaps in your knowledge. So when I went to a writer's conference, my teacher said to me, this book you're writing, it would be really helpful if you read this, and this author, because these authors are doing something that is important to the book that you're writing. And rather than just reading them, I read them slowly, and I go through a series of activities as I'm reading in order to learn as much as I can from the book. So,
I was just going to say, I love that. And I think that, two of my favorite filmmakers do something really similar to this, where before they're making a movie, they get everybody on board and they basically hold little film festivals, right? And it's like, okay, well, this is the kind of thing that we're going to do. And, Christopher Nolan, before he shot, I think it was The Dark Knight, the second one, they took 2 weeks to just watch movies.
Yeah.
And he made everybody on the crew, all the actors, there was this series of movies that he made everybody watch because it was intentional viewing, right? It wasn't like, hey, let's just pop some popcorn and watch movies, right? They weren't watching Speed. I forget which movies they were, but they were very intentional. And like, this is the kind of vibe we want to create. These are the kind of performances we're trying to mine. Tarantino does the same thing. There's certain movies he wants you, if you're going to be in his movie, he wants you to have this frame of reference.
Exactly.
And, before we wrote Unicorn Western, we sat and watched 9 Westerns that we wanted to have as a frame
with
of reference.
Everything. Like, if I'm usually saying what, and it is usually films for us, but the same sort of principles apply, is like, what is the feeling for this?
It's been books before too, though, where we say, okay, this is a good practice. For White Space, Dave and I watched the Killing, which is set in Washington, and it's dark and it's rainy and it's intentional. And now I do that. I'm always going, I think it's intentional learning. I think, have you heard that term before? Right? Where if you don't learn a bunch of stuff, you learn what you need to know to do the next thing that you have to do. And I love that philosophy. And I've really tried to adopt that over the last few years. Like, if I need to learn this skill, I'll go out and learn that skill, but I don't need to, go broad and learn 90 things that I might need. And my reading is very much the same. Sometimes I just read for kicks, but right now I'm reading a lot of screenplays because I'm trying to write screenplays. I'll read nonfiction that's based on, if we're organizing the company, I'll read books on management and things like that. If, right now I'm listening to Contact because we're writing Judgment. So it's always about filling your brain with what you need to use rather immediately.
Exactly. One of the things that I really liked is Ray Bradbury. Everyone knows that he said, to write a short story a week. But what a lot of people forget is he recommended to young writers to read an essay, read a poem, and read a short story every day. And that would fuel you. It would fill you up in order to give you something to write from. And so when I approach my intentional reading, I do it 2-pronged. I read novels that have skills and have techniques that I want to learn, or are by authors that write way above my wheelhouse. And I also read a lot of short stories. And the short stories actually has probably improved my writing the most. For a couple reasons. One, everyone, I'm not a fast reader. So for me to read a bunch of different genres, a bunch of different writers, a bunch of writers that write in different ways, it's going to take me a few years. Whereas in the course of a month, I can read 4 extremely different short stories. And so over the course of the year, I've read everything from magical realism to science fiction to really like highbrow literary fiction to literary fiction that doesn't work, but also does something else. It's hard to commit to reading something that's bad if it's like 300 pages. And I actually learn just as much, if not more, from reading a bad story than I do from reading a good one. But I can commit to reading a bad 15-page short story. I can commit to that. I can get through it. And as I'm reading, I don't just read, I take a lot of notes. And that is the other thing that really helps me, is taking a lot of notes, which has been difficult during my move to e-reading. But I've created a system where I have a notebook that I keep my notes in, and that way I have them after the fact.
What sort of notes are you taking? What is that? What's that?
When I'm taking notes, I do a lot of note taking as far as like language that I find interesting, punctuation that I find that's artistic and interesting or different in some way, characters, things that I find aren't working for me. I take notes on places where I find myself wanting to skim, places where I find myself feeling bored. And I also take notes on places where I realize after the fact, you get really into something and you forget that you're even taking notes, and you forget to look at what you're reading. And then when I wake up from that and I realize, whoa, I was really into that, I'll take a note on that as well.
What were you were going to say something, Dave? I cut you
off. I think one of the good things about short stories is it also teaches you to be lean with your language. And that's something that even if you're writing an epic-sized novel, learning how to be lean with your language and write with intention and just not rambling on is something you can learn a lot from short stories on.
I love the art for all those reasons. I know we've talked about this before, but the Pixar and they make their shorts, right? And it's the stockholders are not happy about that, right? And they were kind of slapped on the wrist because why are you making these shorts? There's no money in them, right? And they would say, well, because it's a way for us to test out new directors. Yeah, that's it. We're testing out new directors, and we give them a chance to prove themselves on shorts, and then they go on to make movies. Several years pass and no director graduates from shorts to movies. So the stockholders get them together again and say, all right, Pixar, like it's been a few years. You still spend millions of dollars on these shorts. Why? And they say, oh, because we test new technology. That's what we do. We test new technology on these shorts and they help us make better movies. A few years later, well, what technology have you tested? Because that's not really true. Why are you making these shorts, Pixar? And so finally Pixar just said, you know what? Because we learn, because we want to, because they make us better storytellers, because telling a 3-minute story is vastly different than telling a 90-minute story. And we're storytellers, damn it. And I love that,
Exactly. And someone just asked a question asking, if the novel pacing falls off when reading a lot of short stories and writing a novel. And for me, I found that over the past year of reading a lot of short stories, and over the past year I've read, in 2015, I read about 130 short stories. And as I went back and was revising my novel, I didn't find that I had problems with my pacing. I actually found that I was better able to spot pacing problems because I was used to spotting them in smaller pieces of work. So when I was reading back through my novel, before I would get to a spot and I'm like, what is wrong with this? But now I can look back and say, I know what's wrong with this. This pacing is wrong because of this thing and this thing and this thing. Whereas before I took this on, I wouldn't have been able to spot that.
So Maya, what's a good way for people to find books that will help them, regardless of genre? How do they know what's good versus what they shouldn't waste their time with?
Well, I mean, reviews, obviously, you need to, but not like the Amazon reviews. Read the books that writers are reading. So find out what Stephen King is reading. Find out what Margaret Atwood is reading. Find out what Zadie Smith is reading. And that is a really good hint to finding books that are perhaps books that other writers are finding really valuable. Because what the average reader is enjoying is one thing. But if you're trying to improve your skill, you want to read above your pay grade. You want to read something that's challenging, something that might be a little difficult, something that is very different from what you're reading. And doing that is helpful. We actually, after a year of reading short stories, we started a podcast that was a book club. And I think book clubs, whether they're online or in person, are huge because you're going to be exposed to books that you wouldn't necessarily pick for yourself. Sometimes I pick books randomly. We do definitely pick short stories randomly. 3 of the 4 hosts never read the short stories before we pick them. It's just a matter of exposing yourself to a lot of different writing that is of a quality that you're going to learn from, rather than reading from writers that are actually at your level. By reading above, you're forced to stretch and you're forced to find out what it is that's the difference between what you're writing and what they're writing.
Yeah, I love the parallel here because you always say you're basically the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? In life. Like
I'm sorry I'm weighing y'all down, guys.
We love you anyway, but it's like it's true. If you kind of are the average, that's why you want to elevate. And you're saying that you're the average of what you read. If you as a reader and as a writer, and if you want to write better, then you have to read better. And it is kind of infuriating how many writers are out there who say, well, I don't have the time to read. And well, no, you're not making the time to read, but you have to fill your tank as much as you're emptying it, and otherwise you're not going to improve. And for me, it was a couple of years actually where I didn't read anything. I was just writing, and it was almost like I would equate it to my fingers not working anymore because I typed so much. They would lock up.
Yeah.
It was a little like that where I would get to reading and it would just feel like work because I was editing so much and I couldn't just enjoy the story. So I had to find a different way, and getting into audiobooks really helped me because then I could hear the story, and then that stuff went away. And now I read. I'm always reading, whether it's on the Kindle or in my ears or whatever. But you have to find ways to make it work. You have to find ways to put things in if you're constantly taking things out.
Exactly. And I have to admit, the reason why I started with short stories was because I'm a slow reader and I wasn't reading. And I was having a hard time committing myself to reading a 300, 400, 500 page book, and setting aside that time every day. And I was able to prime my pump with short stories. A short story takes an hour to read. I can read a short story a week. And then after a lot of months of doing that, reading a novel felt more natural. It felt easier. My reading level actually went up. So I'm able to read books and enjoy them, books that before I might have thought were drudgery or not understood the pacing. Now I understand them better.
I think that this is on a few levels for me. So I will sometimes intentionally choose books, or it's been movies a lot, but books as well for tone. So like this is going to echo, I want to aspire to write like this. Sometimes it's more of a background process. And so I've noticed I'm editing The Ruby Room. And Sean and I wrote that a year and a half ago. Like, it's just one of these things where we wrote 2 books together. We released one and we waited, and it's just like, so I'm revisiting work from like forever ago, and we've gotten better. Like, let's just say it that way. And so like looking back, I'm like, there's something that's happening in kind of economy of description and dialogue. And then the last thing is, and I don't even know if you were going to talk about this, but do you include like, do you read nonfiction as well for sort of research purposes?
I've actually started reading essays, which is something I never would have thought to read. It wasn't until I read Ray Bradbury's advice and I sat down and read an essay, and I realized that through all my school years of writing essays, I've never actually sat down and read an amazing essay. Exactly. And so I found that reading essays has been great. I've started reading more magazine articles that are that are really high quality. I've started reading the New Yorker, the Atlantic, Medium, a lot more long form material. I don't read a lot of like nonfiction, but right now I'm reading The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion, which is a memoir. And I'm learning things in reading that I'm able to use in my novel, because it's a very personal type of writing. And that's one of the fields I want to go for in my novel. And so I'm noticing, like you, Johnny,
Mm-hmm.
people say, why don't you just self-publish a novel? I'm like, I'm not ready, because every time I spend 4 months waiting and then I go back and I revise it, I'm still learning. I'm learning so much through reading all this different material and taking notes and discussing them. I think that's another important part, is having those discussions with people about what you're reading and finding things that you don't necessarily think of in the same book. And through all that, my writing has gotten exponentially better than it was a year ago.
There have been times that I've sort of binge read or watched sometimes, or listened to stuff that ends up being background for a book. So one of the things, this is just a real quick example. I know there are examples I'm not thinking of, and maybe Sean knows some of them, but we're working on the Invasion series right now, and Sean's like, you need to watch where we got to now, or how we got to now. What's the name of that?
Okay. Well, I don't want to get into spoilers here
and stuff, but
easy to. But yeah, basically, I've been watching this PBS series called How We Got to Now. That's really, really fascinating, it's great. There's only 6 episodes. I wish there were 60. Like, it's just great. The last one was Light, and it was just about the history of light, which actually is only like a couple hundred years old.
Yeah.
Before that, it was just tallow candles that smelled like burning fat and were toxic fumes. Like, that's it. Our artificial light is a couple hundred years old, and it came from sperm whales, which incidentally, the oil does look like jism, and that is why they're called sperm whales. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, PBS, baby. So that burned with a pure white light that they never had before. So lamps just became this totally different thing. Anyway, it's filled with fascinating stuff like that. And during our story meeting just yesterday, I said, okay, we just need to both watch all of these again, and it'll give us some of the things that we want to do with the story. It's that intentional viewing. Before we did Beam season 3 last year, there were a whole list of books there, like Abundance and Bold, which we actually mentioned in the last episode with Kevin. Both of those, because there's stuff there. One of our characters, Noah West, in that book, he's not based on Steve Jobs in any way, but he's a Jobsian type character. And so I read the Steve Jobs biography, because why not? Like, it's not like that's going
those
to
things, they seep into your head. It's not intentional.
Right.
It's like,
right. Yeah. It's not that, because that's a biography I should read anyway. Right. He's one of the 20th century.
An Apple fanboy.
He's Jobs was amazing. Right. And so that's a biography worth reading anyway. But if I can also tie it into my work, and it's a long book, but 1-2 ideas that improve the quality of what we're writing, it's absolutely worth it. But I love the phrase intentional reading.
One of the things that really helped me in recognizing what I was doing, because when I started this, it was kind of on instinct. And then I read a book called Reading Like a Writer. I went ahead and got it so that you guys can see it, by Frances Prose. It is an amazing book that goes over this, that really talks about not just reading more, but how to read better as a writer. And
I'm so sorry. What was the name of that book?
It's called Reading Like a Writer, and it's by Francine Prose. It's really, really good. It's also available in an audiobook. I have it in both. I go back and forth between both. It's one of the books that when I travel the world, it's coming with me. Just to let you know how important I found that book. And after reading that, I recognized what was happening, because before I was reading all this stuff, I was like, wow, I'm getting a lot better. Why is this? And it was like you said, it seeps into your brain. So the more you expose yourself, the more you live, the more you read, the more you talk to people.
Dave, not like you think. Don't expose yourself in that way.
Bigger pool you're going to have when you're writing. And a lot of that's going to be subconscious.
There is a book that I want to recommend that I recently picked up. I only read a little bit of it so far. The Art of Memoir by Mary Karr. It's definitely one of those books that I think will help you. And I think basically teaching you how to write about your life, or even if you're not writing about your life, writing about, fictional lives in a way that people can really connect with. And she's a memoirist who's like one of the best from what I've heard.
Yeah, she's really, really well known.
We have a question or a comment. Kevin Tomlinson says, I read tons of biographies, also business histories. You learn a lot about how people think, their motives, how they problem solve, invaluable for creating believable characters. Definitely agree.
So true.
Well, Chrissy's comment actually echoes something that my direct experience. So Chrissy actually, here, I'll read Chrissy's. When I went to college, I took a bunch of science, history, and anthropology courses that helped with world building and characterization more than any writing course could have. Learning with intent is quite useful. Now, mine was not like the order is backwards, but the reading and the stuff that so in case you don't know anything about me or my history, I actually came very close to getting a PhD in genetics, and I went to grad school and everything, and so I had this whole training as like a scientist, and I had lab experience. And then I became an author, right? So
now he has ab experience.
Now I have ab experience. And so I became an author. And so it's like, there's this temptation to say, well, I didn't use my degree. Like, why did I go? But that stuff is very, very much in a lot of our work. The beam is thick with it, like all of that. Dead City, which hasn't been released to the world, I relied on a lot of that back history, that stuff that's just plinking around in my head as to, all that biochemistry and stuff. So it can work in mysterious ways, basically.
Dave's time at the paper, has definitely covered the way that he sees the world and the way that he talks about characters and people and motivations. And, there's a lot of hate there. And I think it was born.
A well-known hatred.
Yeah, it's just sharpened. But yeah, it's just knowing. I mean, this is the same thing we talk about all the time, which is knowing why you're doing something and not just doing it. As writers, we all should be reading, but it's not just about, reading whatever. It's about thinking, what am I going to read now? And, as far as my reading queue, I pretty much know what I'm going to read for the next couple of months. The same with watching. I never channel surf. I just never, ever do it. I watch TV every single day, but it's never on accident. I always know exactly what I'm going to watch and why I'm watching it.
Yeah, I gave up TV. I watch it very rarely. But when I do, partially because I watch it so rarely, I'm very picky about what I watch. Similarly, because I know that I have an opportunity to expand my horizons. So why not use it?
Hey, Honey Boo Boo has expanded many horizons.
No.
Another one of those sort of it applies to everything disciplines, if we're talking nonfiction, is psychology. And I've read a lot of psychology and stuff. And that book Dave was talking about, the TV show and the book, The Brain by David, is it Eagleman?
Eagleman, yeah.
Yeah.
Eagleman. I listened to that audiobook, and the things that you learn about just the way that the brain works in human psychology is useful for any character, because, guess what? All humans have psychology and brains.
Yeah, I use it all the time. That was actually my major in undergrad, and I did a huge thesis project in psychology, and I spent a lot of time in sales, and all of that informs my writing when it comes to character development. That's actually my strength, is my character development. I also spent a lot of time doing method acting in high school, which is huge for character development. Where I find my weaknesses are in narrative. So like my dialogue is really strong, but my narration is less strong. And in pacing, not that my pacing is bad. My pacing's good, but it's not intentional. I want to have more control over my pacing. So when I choose books to read, that's what I'm doing. For example, the book I'm working on right now, I looked at it as just literary fiction. It was pointed out to me that the pacing should be more suspense and that I would do good to read Talented Mr. Ripley and books like that. And so,
that's a great book.
Exactly. And so I'm going back and I'm reading those, and I'm actually taking notes with each chapter, kind of like what is suggested with the story grid, where I'm talking about, well, what is the point of the scene? What is the point of this chapter? What is the pacing like in this scene? What is the pacing like in this chapter? And how is that achieved? And then when I go back and revise my novel, I can use that to be more intentional about my my tone and the speed of the book.
But that's it. It's the intentional word again, right? So whatever we're doing, we need to pay attention. So it's the whole yard, right? It's not just deciding ahead of time what you're going to read or watch and why, but then making sure that you're present while you're there and you're learning what you can. And I mean, like, I don't take notes on stuff that I read at all, because, for me, that's 80-20. Like, the time that I would spend taking notes, I could probably read another book, right? And so I'd rather just go faster. But that's just what works for me. The point is we're both paying attention.
Exactly.
We're both really mindful of what we're putting into our brains, and we're really mindful while we're absorbing it as to how it can benefit us.
Kate Morgan says, I'm so glad Maya mentioned theater. I still use everything I learned as a performer in my writing today, especially how to be fearless in the choices I make.
Yeah, definitely.
I wish I had taken theater. I wanted to, but my mother wouldn't let me.
I literally do exercises that I used to do in high school.
Do a show about moms, like we just
developing characters.
Yeah, David had things to say about yours, Sean.
What were you saying, Maya? Sean so rudely.
I'm so sorry.
I was just saying that there were exercises that we used to do in high school to develop our characters, and I actually do them to this day when I'm developing characters for my writing. So I'll be in the shower, in the car, and I will do freeform monologues. I will do like an interview of myself, and I'll record it and watch it back later. It helps me, and it's totally stuff I learned in high school.
What would be the sort of the go-tos are there like universals, Maya, since you've done so much of this very intentionally? Like, I mean, obviously you showed the book about intentional reading, but I mean, as far as like, are there like bedrock books that you would consider like kind of everybody should read? I know that's a general question.
That is a really general question. What I would recommend is, yes, read that book in particular. That book is very good. But when you're thinking about choosing books that you're going to read a variety of books and read the people in those genres that are known for being the pillars of that genre. People also look at people in the genre that are doing things that are different. So if you are reading reviews and you hear about this great science fiction book, but it's really, really different and half the people love it and half the people hate it, that's a book you want to be reading. You want to read the books that are really pushing the boundaries. And those are the things that I would recommend. I would also highly recommend short stories because you can get through a volume of work that you can't necessarily if you're reading novels. So if you're reading a short story every day or every week, you can get through 50 different types of writing and really dissect and understand it in the time it would take you a year to do it if you were looking for those same types of writing in novel form.
Now, how do you find short stories? Because short stories don't do very well commercially, and you don't hear a lot of people talking about them. So where's a good place to find ones specifically in a genre that you're looking for?
Google.
All right. Well, that's the end of the show today. Just Google.
No, I that sounds silly, but honestly, that's what I do when I'm looking for short stories for the podcast. Is I will literally, like, if I know we haven't read anything from an Asian writer for a while, I will do free short story Korean or short story sci-fi experimental, and I will look that way. Also, there are great collections. So by doing that, by reading a bunch of short stories that I find just in general internet searches, then I discover writers that I want to read more of their work. And then I will go
lots of rabbit holes,
exactly.
right?
And so then I'll go and I'll pick up their collections. And that's happened to me a lot. So, people like Carver, everybody needs to read Raymond Carver. Even if you don't like him, you need to read him. And if the first couple stories don't work, just keep reading, because he writes in a way that the more you read his stuff, the more you understand what he's doing, which I think is really important. I would recommend looking at, I'm going to plug myself, literaryroadhouse.com. In addition to, doing a short story every week, we have a list of all the short stories that we've read for the podcast. There are certain places that pop up a lot in the show. We tend to read a lot from Carve magazine. They have really good editors, and the stories that get in there tend to be really interesting, and they tend to push the envelope. And a lot of times we'll find stories that half of us hate and half of us love, which is what we want. We don't want to read stories that don't prompt discussion. We want to push ourselves. We read a lot of stories from The Atlantic, New Yorker. I read from Kenyon Review, all the big ones. Lighthouse Press is good for like horror. And then when you find the authors that you're interested in, you can look for their collections, but also you can find really good interviews by them. And a lot of times in interviews, you'll find out what they're reading. And it is a big rabbit hole, but it's a really, really helpful rabbit hole. It's a great rabbit hole. And Free Culture is another spot where they've got a huge listing of short stories. World Literature Today, huge listing of short stories that have been translated. And so those are the places where I would go.
Scott King says for sci-fi fantasy, you can read all the awards nominees, Hugos and such. Yeah, and there's a couple of magazines I subscribe to that have short stories. I think Ellery Queen and Alfred Hitchcock. I don't know if they're both still out or not. But I know Ellery is, but I'm not sure on Hitchcock. But yeah.
And pretty religiously at the end of each year, Amazon has it's maybe New Year's or so. They run a $1.99 on all these different collections, like the best American short stories, the best American science fiction short stories.
Yeah, I get those.
I always. Do you ever read them? Or do you just get them?
I've read a few of the stories. I don't read the whole thing because, and like I say, fiction I don't make time for as much as I do nonfiction. But I like having them, and I definitely will read them.
Yeah. Maya, do you I mean, personally, I learn a lot from crappy stuff. Right? Do you learn a lot when you read something and you're like, this is not good and this is why it's not good?
This is
or
actually
do you give up,
why I don't read the short stories that I submit to the podcast. I literally choose blind because it ups my ability to find a bad short story that has ended up in a magazine. So when I read a short story that I consider horrible, that is in a really well-known magazine that's known for having great editors, I like to figure out why it ended up there and what it is about the story that I don't like. And usually those are the stories I learn the most from. Totally.
I know a couple of writers that wrote a really awful attempt at comedy.
It didn't win any awards to get in any magazines, though. As a matter of fact, I don't even think it's published anymore.
Yeah, I think
Hitler had some things to say about that story.
I had some really good experiences when I was first writing, and I read a couple of very marginal books, and they were published. And a couple of them were award winners, and I just thought, you know what, this can't be that hard, because it's motivating in a way, especially if you could take the time to deconstruct them, and like you said, figure out why was this rewarded, and why is it not resonating with me?
Yeah, because a lot of times you'll find that it was rewarded because there was something unique about it that it was doing right. Even though there's a bunch of stuff that's wrong with it, there was something in that the editor saw that they thought was interesting or novel in some way. And that's what I always like to try to find out. I would also recommend, as we were talking about, the prizes and the great American short stories and stuff like that, I would also push people to read internationally. Short stories that are from other countries a lot of times are written slightly differently, and I learn a lot from that as well.
Yeah, I also think that you can look at really popular books that you don't, if you're going for cash, and you're trying to be a popular writer and just sell a lot of stuff, you can look at books that aren't necessarily that well written and but are doing really well, and deconstruct them and say, what is it that people are liking about these books? Because there's a reason. They don't just blow up out of nowhere. It's always for a reason.
Exactly.
And one other thing that you said that I really liked was the books that are polarizing, right? where they're not the 3-star review books. They're the ones where you only have 1 or you only have 5. I think that those are always much more interesting to discuss. Man of Steel right now is apparently kind of a mess behind the scenes at Warner Brothers because they're getting all these early reactions, and the early reactions are basically all either, wow, this did some interesting things that we didn't quite expect, and it's pushing the DC universe hard, and people are really, really loving it, or they're just totally hating it, and they don't like, they don't like what Snyder's doing with the franchise and all of that. But to me, that's a more interesting movie where people aren't just like, yeah, it was okay, it was another popcorn flick. To have strong reactions one way or the other, it makes it worth discussion.
Exactly.
David Jonas, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, has a question. As to that point, why would a book that's not, quote, well-written trend more than a well-written book? I don't know that it's a why necessarily. It would be did I miss something? Did I miss a presupposition there? No, he says why. Why would a book?
Well, I think a couple things. The average reader doesn't necessarily have a huge pull of reading in their back pocket. They haven't necessarily been trained to read good books, first off. But also, a lot of books that aren't well written have really good story, or they're really fun, or they're really emotional, or they're tapping into something in the zeitgeist that nobody else is tapping into. So like 50 Shades of Grey, yeah, it's written horribly, but it was tapping into, lonely women that had an e-reader that could read smut and have nobody know about it, and that were curious about BDSM. It was 2 years after The Secretary came out, and so there was something in the zeitgeist that was already there, and it tapped into it, regardless of whether or not it was well written. And then the fun. There's a lot to be said for reading something that's fun. Now, you can have a fun book that's well written, but you can also have a fun book that's not well written. And if you look at what made it fun, then you can take that for your own writing and write something that's fun that's also well written.
Well, because it's the same thing with film, right? Not all readers know what a well-written book is. Like some people, they just want the story. They're not necessarily looking at the same things that writers are. And you look at a lot of movies and you think, how could that possibly be popular? You know what Netflix's most popular movie of all time is? Their most popular download? The Ridiculous Six. All right. So
what is that?
It's an Adam Sandler movie.
Oh,
and
you don't want to know.
Yeah,
just the trailer makes me groan.
Yeah, it's terrible. I couldn't get 15 minutes into it, and it's terrible. But it did very well.
You're forgetting the well-established fact that I've laid out many times, and you all keep forgetting, is half of America is made of idiots, and you keep forgetting that.
Well, I'm not forgetting it. I'm just saying that a clumsily written book that has a lot of the other things in place, who's to say that deserves success any less than a really well-written book that doesn't have those tropes in place that people are looking for? So it's
right.
About,
it's what's the definition of enjoyment? Like, you know what I mean? If you enjoy it, what does it matter if it's, quote, well-written?
Yeah, and a crappy, popcorn movie that, sometimes people just want car chases, explosions, and titties. Like, that's just like what people are looking for.
They've made how many Fast and Furious movies?
I love those movies. I have to admit it.
I've yet to watch one, but I'll piss all over them. And I'm afraid to watch one now because I'm afraid I'll like
the first one, and I like the first one.
I hate the idea of those movies. I hate that they exist. Really?
Fast cars, girls in short skirts. What is there to hate?
Yeah,
it's just ridiculous. It's so unrealistic.
But people are going those for realism, Dave.
And by the way, usually when people drive like that, they wind up killing a bunch of people. Are these people so self-important that whatever they're doing, being all fast and furious, is worth endangering lives?
Yeah, they're saving the planet.
Yes.
Just hit Dave's hot button with driving.
All those people in the Fast and Furious movies are fucking cunts, right, Dave?
Yes. I remember when I shouldn't say who it is. Somebody should I say who it was?
Since we have no idea what you're talking about, then yes, absolutely.
Somebody at our publishing house, when we were published with Amazon, and we were talking to them, and they said how much they love Fast and Furious. I said, well, this is a perfect person to guide our books.
I have no problem. For the record, I have no problem with Fast and Furious. I think I've only seen the first one, but I thought it was awesome.
Yeah,
I love every single one of them. It's totally a guilty pleasure.
You haven't
back to the point.
Okay, I'm gonna watch one. Okay, I'm gonna watch one this weekend, and I
watch the first one.
Okay, watch the first one.
All right.
Yeah, watch the first one. But back to the point. How you read is going to also be determined by what your goal is. So if your goal is to write really fun popcorn books, you're not necessarily going to have the same reading list that I have. You still want to read lots of fun popcorn books, but read the best popcorn books that you can find, Me, I am trying to write literary fiction, so my reading list is annoyingly pretentious. But that's what I'm doing. So, you have to look at your own goals and change, be free to change your reading list if your goals change.
Is there a book equivalent to Fast and Furious films that you read?
There is always.
I wonder if there was a novelization for the Fast and Furious movies. I would love to read that.
Hey, I'm not even going to go there. I'm reading the comments and I'm like, nope, not going to go there.
All right. So why don't we wrap up? We're at the hour. Maya's podcast is Literary Roadhouse. Is just on iTunes. Just search iTunes.
You know what? Actually, just go to the website. It's the quickest way to go is to just go to the website, literaryroadhouse.com. We actually have 3 podcasts and we're growing more. So you can find everything, because some of the podcasts you might like, some of them you might not like. And so I always just tell people to just go to the website.
And what are the other podcasts?
Literary Roadhouse Book Club, which is a monthly book club. Self-explanatory. And then we have the Bradbury Challenge, where me, Chrissy Moss, and Gerald Hornsby, we all write a short story every week.
And then the Fast and Furious
and talk
podcast.
About it.
And the website is, again, literaryroadhouse.com.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for being our Jill of all trades, basically, and for helping to keep this ship afloat that we call Sterling and Stone.
And thank you for being so great.
Thanks for everything, Maya.
She didn't mean that.
I meant every word.
So thanks for everybody for listening. Remember, Iterate and Optimize is out. sterlingandstone.net/IO. Get your copy. And don't forget literaryroadhouse.com. That's sort of a mouthful. So thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.